Well, it's officially winter. This solar panel is doing nothing for me right now. With all this snow on here, I should really clean that off. Anyway, I'm over at my mom and stepdad's farm in Ohio and wanted to take a moment to talk about tools. I'm a huge utilitarian. Like, I feel like every tool you have that gives you a new ability is like having an extra superpower. Or maybe not superpower, but the kinds of powers that Batman has. So I own a lot of tools. I've got this big Craftsman chest full of them. And when I went about paring down what I was going to have with me when I moved my life into the confines of a Toyota Prius, clearly I had some decision making to do. And so in order to keep myself from getting a little out of hand, I wanted to restrict the amount of things that I brought to the size of this. And I mean, there's a few other things, like I've got an air compressor in here that's kind of like a tool that's not in this. But as far as using some of my favorite things, like a drill, a reciprocating saw, those were not going to make the cut. So when I was selecting what would make the cut, I was doing this sort of balance between like, what's the likelihood I'm going to actually use it, how much space it takes. So something like a piece of sandpaper could come in handy, not super likely, but it's a piece of paper. So that made the cut, for instance. So today I'm going to open this up and go through a number of the things, or all the things, that I actually have with me currently. I mean, when I first made my Prius living video, I did a shot showing like some of the stuff that was in here, and I got a bunch of comments from people like, why do you have a staple gun? You will be very relieved to know that I no longer keep a staple gun in here. It got cut. What has remained? Let's go over it. All right, first off is the trowel, which I have never used this, but I had this just in case nature were to call, specifically if I were in nature and needed to do the number 2, you want to bury that. Next is an Altoids tin that is my sewing kit. I'm not exactly a seamstress, but it's good to have a needle and thread to put on a new button or two instead of buying a complete new shirt. And in here I've just got a few needles, a tape measure, some black thread, some, oh, that's a button, some white thread, a thimble. Okay, yeah, you get it. Next, I have a bunch of command strips or poster mounts, as well as some hooks to use them with. I figured I could use these for running cables and, you know, keeping them up out of the way. Next, this has come in handy a whole lot. This is a ratcheting screwdriver where all the bits fit on these little, whatever you would call them. This has been the most essential bit out of here. This has been used a number of times to tighten the sports rack on the top of the vehicle. Every once in a while, I will like open the door and I'll hear like metal clank around where it had become loosened somehow. And I just throw it in there and tighten it up. So I've got all these different bits, Phillips head, flat head, and like I said, it's nice that it ratchets. Accompanying this piece is this. This is a teeny turner. It's the same sort of thing. It's multi-bit, it's magnetic. Being able to eliminate what was essentially a whole drawer of my tool chest down to these two things was incredibly helpful. Next, I have a folding box cutter. Don't think I've used this at all. I've got a number of different adhesives for if something's breaking and I need to put it back together. For instance, so I've got epoxy here. I have Seal All, which is more of like a rubbery type sealant, I believe. Then a DevCon Home Welded all-purpose. In Atlanta, I had gone out to a bar, and when I came back, I was parked downtown. When I came back, someone had apparently given the people's elbow to my passenger side rear view mirror, and it was just hanging off there. So I immediately went to the nearest Ace Hardware and bought some adhesives and fixed that. Next, I have some Aviation Snips. Anytime you need to cut something, this will probably do the job. Next, I've got an adjustable wrench. This being adjustable makes the amount of space that it takes up way more well spent. Next, I've got a locking set of pliers. I don't think that I've had to use these, but it seemed like something that could come in handy. Another set of pliers. This wrench, which is also adjustable. Next, I have a metal file. And I've only recently come to truly appreciate how great metal files can be. And it doesn't take up that much space, so I threw it in there. Next, we have needle nose pliers for the things that are a little too tight for the other sets of pliers to grab. Next, I have a box cutter that when this becomes less sharp, you just pop off the tip and then push it a little further, and that allows me to not have to carry a whole set of blades. In fact, I should be thinking about how to pare this down now that I'm going through it. Now that I realize I have this and this, I can probably get rid of the larger one. If you have the space, it's nice to be able to pop these blades out and put in a fresh one that's nice and sharp, but if I were to want to keep this in my car and want to have the availability of fresh blades, I need to have not only this contraption, but also a set of blades. So it makes it a lot easier for me to say, this thing is out, and just keep this guy, because it essentially has probably like 10 fresh blades when you just pop them off, and yeah. So this is getting eliminated. Next, I have 3 paint markers. I don't do graffiti, but I figured I might find some sort of use for these. So far, that's not been the case. So these might be able to be eliminated. Maybe I could at least pare it down to just the black one or something. Next, I have these guys. Now you might think, why not just use one of these other adjustable wrenches for whatever purpose these are for? And the reason I have these is because they have a very specific job, and that is they fit onto the bolts that hold this hitch contraption on, and it's kind of a tight space down there. And if those were to come loose, that could be a disaster. Using these makes that job much easier. So for my money, or for my space rather, it's a value add. That's the phrase. Next, I have some beetle wraps. These are sort of like zip ties, but they're reusable. I figured I would use these a lot more than I do, but I haven't actually used these for anything, I don't think. But I thought I might be like wrapping up cables or something. They seem like they might be useful. So maybe what I should do is just take like 3 of these out of here and dump the rest of them. Actually, I'm gonna do that. Boom, we're making progress. Maybe eventually I'll be able to put a reciprocating saw in here. Kind of in the same vein as that, I have in this bag, there's Velcro, rubber bands, small carabiners, and pipe cleaners. So yeah, let me see. I can just jam 3 of these beetle wraps into here. Next, I have this 1-inch paintbrush. I've not had to paint anything on the road, but I mean, I do have things that are painted, like the surface of this, so that could come in handy sometime. Next, I have fuses to replace in the Prius. Very important to have. Prius fuses are very small. A little convenience. It's the little things. A tape measure. This is a clamp that I've not used, but I thought it was really cool. It's one that when you clamp it down on something, it locks there. Thought that could come in handy at some point, and it's quite small compared to many other clamps. Next, I have a series of hex wrenches. I think the reason I put them in there was because, like I said before, I have to use a hex wrench on tightening my roof rack, and that's accomplished by this guy, so really this can be eliminated. Bye-bye. Next, I've got magnetic tape. I thought I would use this for something to like mount something up out of the way, but I have not used that yet. But I don't know that I'm ready to get rid of it. And I have electrical tape, which I have used. Here's some sandpaper. Sandpaper takes up literally no room, so it made the cut. A little bit of rope. Maybe I'll need to tie something up at some point. Not too much rope, not too little. Some Scotch tape. You never know when you need to do some arts and crafts. Here is a ratchet strap. Now this has come in handy a number of times. For instance, when I was trying to transport my bicycle back from Burning Man, I was able to ratchet strap it to the top of the solar panel and it held quite nicely. So this is like one of the most valuable things that I have in here, honestly. Next up, I have a rubber glove. Those can be handy. Next, I have this mask here, which I have not used actually, even though I was in California when the fires were happening. I was not in an area where I really needed to use this, but it could come in handy for that particular instance, or if I'm sick, or if there's some chemical warfare. Even if I thought it would be very unlikely I would use this, it takes up next to zero space. So that is staying. Next, I have a tire pressure gauge. I've got one in the front as well, so that's easier to access, but this is kind of a backup one and it takes up very little space. I could probably get rid of it, but I am going to not do that. This is some bulb grease from the kit that I bought when my dad and I were replacing the headlights, but I don't think I'm going to be replacing my headlights anytime soon again, so this is getting cut. Even though it takes up very little space, I mean, I guess I could say that grease could come in handy in other instances, but it's unlikely. But it takes up very little space, so I'm keeping it. A sweatband, an Under Armour sweatband that was thrown out at a parade in Austin. It could have multiple applications, so keeping that. Just 2 more items. This is a pocket knife. It has scissors, it has a bottle opener, can opener. A good reason to keep it is that it has a wine opener. And you know, if I want to have a romantic night in the old Prius, might want to pop open a bottle of Pinot Noir or something. And next is a little tiny pocket knife that has pliers built into it. I could probably choose this or this, and if it came down to it, I would choose this guy because, again, it has the wine opener. And I already have plenty of other pairs of pliers. So this is getting kicked out. There we go. This is all of my tools that I have with me as I travel. If you have any suggestions for things that I should keep with me that I could also fit in here, especially with all the room I made. Look at all this that's not there anymore. So if you have anything that I could fill this space with that might come in handy, let me know in those comments. And yeah, until next time, take it easy.